Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Emily. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Thank you, Tina. I'm really grateful that you invited me to come.
Are you serious? Are we serious? After this lovely winter solstice you allowed me to participate in? And before I read your bio, can you just talk about the winter solstice and what that means and how you came about with that project?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't even remember where I got the idea from, and nobody will claim credit. So we're just going to say it was a divine moment. But really, the meaning behind the winter solstice event, it's a event where we host a panel of widows, and Tina graciously served on our panel. We ask them some really tough questions and try to get their insights. We have giveaways, we play music, we have activities. It's one of the most popular events that I participate in throughout the year. And the concept behind winter solstice really is that winter solstice is the longest night of the year. And we come together as widows knowing that even though our days may feel really dark and the nights feel long, that every day going forward is going to be a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter.
That is beautiful. Now that you have a bit of sense of her heart, I want to read her bio. Just 1 month shy of their 20th wedding anniversary, Emily was widowed unexpectedly at the age of 37. She and Nathan have 4 children who were the ages of 10 through 19 at the time. She founded Brave Widow in the membership community to help other widows navigate grief, heal their heart, and create a life they love again. She is certified by the accredited Faith-Based Coaching Academy and the Grief Recovery Method Institute. Prior to Brave Widow, Emily served as a senior vice president for Renew Cycle in the healthcare industry, leading teams of 4,000 associates in 100 plus hospitals across the U.S. She earned her MBA in John Brown University with an emphasis in leadership and ethics. Her passion for servant leadership, collaboration, helping people, and bridging gaps is the driving force behind why Brave Widow exists today. Her website is bravewidow.com, and you can email Emily at emily@bravewidow.com. When I read your bio, it gives me the sense that in some bigger than life way, you were prepared to lead Brave Widow.
It's an interesting observation. I think that I have always been the person that is ready to help, to step up, to lead. Sometimes to my own detriment because I can overcommit or allow myself to feel taken advantage of after a certain point. But I just felt really compelled. Shortly after Nathan died, I had several employees or coworkers who were either widowed themselves or knew someone who was widowed asking me, what can I do? How do I help them? What are the next steps? And so just naturally in those first few months, I started putting together checklists, ideas, suggestions, and it just came very natural to me.
Months in to Nathan no longer breathing in this world, you are now setting up the genesis for Brave Widow. Wow. When you look back at that, how do you see that being helpful or impactful to your grief journey?
For me, I approached it from a very tactical standpoint. So I didn't found Brave Widow until probably a year later, but the founding pieces were there. So a very tangible checklist of here are specific things that widows want and need, but they're too ashamed to ask for, they don't even know what they need, or they struggle asking for help. Here's a way that you can talk to a widow. Here are things that you can say that are helpful. Here are things you should avoid saying. So for me, in those first few months in that first year, it really was what I wish I had known, or what I wish people around me had known, and what resources I wish I could have found that I just couldn't seem to find anywhere.
That is a really good point because there are so many people, I believe, that mean well and they're trying to say what they think is helpful or do different things, but they are landing badly. And then there are some people that know how to just do it right. Unfortunately, I believe the people that learn how to do it right have impact from a significant loss that they've learned from that experience. And I'll ask the question that people always want to know. So, what are some things people should not do?
Well, instead of starting with what they shouldn't do, when people ask, like, what should I say? What can I say? Sometimes I'll respond tongue in cheek and say, the best thing you can say is just listen. It's just to be there. And so, what we tend to want to do, it's very much in our nature, is we want to help people, right? We see someone that's hurting, we see they're struggling, we see they're down in the mud, and we want to pull them up. We want to lift their spirits. We want to make them feel better and comfort them. And what I didn't know until I went through this, and what most people don't know, is that there really aren't words that you can say to take away someone's pain. The most priceless gift that you can give them is your time and your willingness to sit in the awkwardness of the tears, of the sadness, of that guttural sound that comes from the pit of your stomach when you're crying so hard, of just saying, this is awful. I'm so sorry this happened to you, and I'm going to just be here with you through all of it. That's one of the best things that I think people can do.
I totally agree with you because it's not fixable. There's no words that you can say. And it is very uncomfortable generally seeing someone you love and care about be probably the most distraught you will see them in their entire life. And to know that you are powerless. But being present, I just want to circle back to that, the power of listening and not listening to answer, but just letting them talk and letting them share whatever may come out of their mouth at that moment of time. You're not trying to end their conversation, you're just trying to hold space for them. I would certainly agree to that concept being very important. When the women, now is Brave Widow for women only, or is it men, or what does that look like?
So currently, I only have women that are there. I do have the community and some of the courses that men could go through as well. But a lot of my marketing and a lot of the things I speak about are women focused.
Okay. And there's a different place because we have a men's only grief support group. They do kind of want their own time. They want to express their emotions in a safe place outside of women because, as you mentioned, there's a part of you in this process that you are also finding yourself. You are who you were, and what that looks like in the absence of your spouse is different. How did that look for you?
Oh, well, I married Nathan when I was 18. I moved straight out of my house. We got married. We had a child less than a year later. And so we grew up together, essentially. I felt very much most of my life and most of the memories I had were with Nathan, not without him. And so for me, I had no idea who I was as an individual person. And that was one of the most unsettling things for me. I felt so untethered, so like a little boat out in the ocean, not sure which way I wanted to go because I didn't even know, what did I like to do on my own? Do I still have the same dreams and goals? And what I learned was that there were a lot of things that we wanted to do together in the future that if it was just going to be me, I didn't want to do that anymore. It didn't seem right, or it felt overwhelming, or it felt pointless. So I really had to figure out this new version of me and this next chapter of life. What kind of life did I want to live? What kind of adventures did I want to go on? And what kind of legacy did I want to leave behind?
I can relate to every bit of that. My late husband, Mark, and I met, I was 18 in the military. I had left my parents' home, joined the military. I met him at my first duty station. I literally became the woman I am in that relationship with Mark. I know for a lot of women trying to navigate finances, the house, all the different parts of life, because when you're in a marriage or partnership, someone else is doing a piece of it. Any recommendation for someone that is trying to navigate this whole life that's been left to them in the absence of their partner?
Ask for help. It's the one thing that we tend to struggle with, but ask for help and ask for help that's clear. So if it's you want help with your laundry, you want help mowing the lawn, if you have a friend or a family member that's that type A, they like to be in charge, they like to be the boss, they like to be organized, let them be your liaison and lean on them and say, "Hey, could you find some help for me with these 3 things?" Or, "Could we hire someone to do that? Could you call around and get some bids so I can get my roof fixed or I can have the plumbing looked at?" People feel good about being able to help you, and so the more that you will lean into that, the easier it will be. For me, I thought it was just an issue I had with asking for help because 'cause I'm such a high achiever, whatever it takes, I'll get it done type personality, and I would look at tasks that should be simple and just tell myself, I should be able to do this. Why am I struggling with this? But the reality is, in grief, your ability to do things is reduced. Plus, you have everything else piled on your shoulders overnight. So give yourself grace, lower the expectations that you have, even on the things you were able to do in the past, and lean into asking for help.
Lovely advice. And I just want to circle back to that a little bit more because I had no idea that my mental capacity would be reduced to such a level. And when I talk to people, they've often not heard of that grief would impact their brain, such as being in a traumatic event or grief fog or grief brain. When you hear those different terms, what are some things that come to mind to you that other people should go, oh, that is me. Now that I've heard that, I can really resonate. And the reason why I want you to explain that, it sort of reduces the bar. It's like, okay, this is what it looks like, and I'm okay in this messy place.
Yes. So, one of the things that I learned is that through grief, when you have a traumatic experience like that, the part of your brain that puts you in survival mode, fight or flight, gets that adrenaline going, it takes over. So, the part of your brain that can think clearly, that can see the big picture, that can think logically is overshadowed by just your natural instincts. And that's one reason we tend to feel exhausted because our nervous system is really keyed up. It's tight. You may even feel a tightness in your shoulders and your neck, and just a general sense like you're on high alert all the time. And one of the stories I love to share is that within the first few weeks after Nathan died, I remember I was getting all the paperwork together for our attorney to look at our estate and probate the will. And I pulled out all my file folders and I was organizing all the important paperwork. And I picked up our car titles and I put them in a specific stack on the floor, like, oh, this is important. I'm going to put this here. Okay, put the rest of the things away. Went to bed, came in the next morning, no car titles. I pulled out all the file folders, no car titles. I spent hours going painstakingly page by page by page. I pulled out trash cans. I pulled out boxes, just like, where did I put these car titles? And I would find them a year later across the other side of my house in a silverware drawer. Now,
That is
how
so real. That is so real. That is so real.
How or why or when I did that, I have no idea. But there were so many times where I finally felt my husband had ADHD, and I finally felt his pain of like walking from one room to the next and going, "Why am I here? Why did I bring hand soap to my office? This is weird." You know, like just feeling really confused. And so it's important for people to know that that's normal. And I've always used Post-it notes a lot, but I live and die by these Post-it notes, reminders on my phone, and events on the calendar to bring some sanity to your life when you're living in the fog.
Those are excellent. Excellent. And as you said that, I can envision from my own experience sorting through the paperwork. Then you get up with this title and you're crying, thinking about when you purchased a car and what that looked like. And then you went to get some silverware and then you do something else. It is uncomprehendable the level in which you're operating at. And some people have to go back to work in a very short period of time. Any suggestions on how to navigate the workplace or to supervisors that may be listening to this conversation and they have someone that's recently widowed or widower and they're needing to be their manager from your experience in coaching?
Yes. So I went to back to work the next week because I wanted a sense of normalcy. We had been sick for 3 weeks, I think, at this point before he died. And I was just emotionally and mentally tired of sickness and death and all of the things. I wanted a feeling somehow that my life was back to normal. So I went back to work fairly quickly. So I would suggest that if people can take FMLA, if they can take some time off work, that they do, or if they can go back in a part time capacity and use part time FMLA or employee benefits. You may also have employee benefits for things like counseling or a grief group, or there may be lots of options you don't know about that you could talk with your HR department. One of the things that I found to be helpful was I sat down with my team of leaders that reported to me, and I just explained, guys, I'm here for you. I don't feel like the same person. I probably am not gonna come across the same way. There may be days or times where I just seem irritable or different or weird, and I just need you to say, like, "Hey, this isn't normal." Just call me out on it, and we'll have a conversation, but just know that I'm doing my best. I'll do whatever I can for you, but I don't even feel like the same person at this point. And I had an amazing team. They were very supportive. From the supervisor aspect, I had employees who lost a adult child or lost a spouse, and I had no idea, like, okay, well, they have bereavement leave, so after 3 days, they're gonna be good, right? Like, they might be a little bit sad, but okay, bereavement's a good 3 to 5 days, and we just need to get back. And so what I would encourage if you are managing someone who's gone through grief is to recognize that they are not going to be able to operate the same level that they were before. They may even have a significantly increased apathy for work. Like they just don't care about it the way they used to. And so I would just be extremely kind and understanding and even help engaging them in conversations about whether they need to take a less demanding role or if they would like to explore something new in the future. Because I forget the statistic, but there is evidence that many widows will actually change careers or change jobs or change companies within the first couple of years of widowhood. So I think employers really have an opportunity here to come side by side with people that have gone through this and help salvage that employee somewhere in their organization.
I can relate to that. I was one of those people. And for me, nothing felt right. It didn't feel the same. And it was too painful to think about going to this workplace and coming home to Mark's absence. I needed to change that narrative. I literally relocated from Pennsylvania to Virginia. And we were in the process of trying to move to Virginia. In fact, Mark had already taken a job, but I can definitely relate to what that looks like. In your journey of grief, I know the grief recovery handbook, I see the little purple book over there. Can you talk about that and just how that is so helpful? Just to read the book before they may get into the next level of help with that.
Yeah, I read so many books about grief, and I tend to really nerd out about different topics, and I just wanted to understand, like, why is this so hard? And someone had recommended the Grief Recovery Method Handbook, and it was the first book I read that made me go, "Okay, this makes sense now. I'm not going crazy." Everything I learned in there about the different myths about grief, about why it hurts when people try to say things they think are helpful, like, "Oh, your husband's in a better place now." Like, why does that bother us? Why is there such a disconnect with what people say? And it gave you some tangible tools that you could start using as you read the book that really just open your eyes to loss that you've experienced your entire life that maybe you've never even acknowledged. And so for me, it was such a powerful book. I didn't even know that there was a system and a process. So once I read it, I was like, I have to get certified. This is just really, really good, and it's one of the top recommendations that I give to widows.
And thank you. And when you talk about the grief in your past, and you'll know this better than me, but when they take you through that timeline to identify your first losses and what was the pattern of dealing with loss and walking that through and then identifying the patterns that you learned, I'll say lesser losses, cannot fill this space. But being reflective and being able to do that is very insightful. How do you feel about journaling?
I think it's very helpful, and for people, I tend to type a lot faster than I can write, but I know there's also power in putting pen to paper. So for me, I find journaling, I wish I would journal more because I think it's very helpful to see your progression over time in how you change how you view and think about things. I use it primarily as a way to get all of the noise out of my head and onto a place that I can look at it and evaluate. Like, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Because for me, I can help other people evaluate their thoughts and feelings 10 times easier than I can my own.
Right.
So sometimes I need to just jot them all down and then look at them and go, oh, okay, here's, what I need to do to move forward. And for people that don't like to write or you don't like to type, sometimes too, I'll recommend that you just do voice memos. And a lot of software now will auto transcribe it for you, or you can keep that, in a record somewhere. But
Mhm.
just getting out your thoughts and getting out what you feel, I think can be really powerful.
Thank you. When Nathan left this world, did you feel like you no longer could exist and life just was unbearable? Or was it the children that pulled you into having to function?
So I definitely felt like a lot of the thought that I had continually was what's the point? What does it matter? We had some pretty big life dreams. We got married very young. We were very broke. We worked really hard. I went back to school. We had kids. We were on this trajectory of reaching certain life goals, and we were very close to hitting some of those. And so it felt like as I would get to experience them over the next couple of years, soured very much by the fact of, well, yeah, but what does it matter? He's not here. And one of the stories that I tell is that I had a memorial garden made for him a few months after he died. And I thought that it would be a great idea and it would be a celebration of his life. But I would just go out there and be tormented. Like it was just a constant reminder he was never there. And I can remember one day just crying so hard and my chest hurt so badly. I thought my heart was gonna just burst right there. And I remember a specific afternoon when I was doing that, and I thought about my kids, and I thought about the fact that they had lost their dad, and even though I was technically still alive, I felt just like a shadow of the person that I was, like I was just going through the motions, and I was just living life, and I thought about how if I have a typical life, this is another 40 or 50 years of this, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around, like, this is it? Like, okay, I've done some grief work, but, like, this is the rest of this was supposed to be my story? I just couldn't fathom it, and so, sitting on that bench, I decided, I have to figure out how to be able to get on the other side of grief, not only for me, but for my 4 kids that very much don't wanna see the legacy of their father be that it destroyed their mother's life as well.
Mm, wow. At 37, Nathan is gone, and thank you for that. And you are wrestling with, you said technically still alive, like existing, but that idea of what you have in the Brave Widow wanting people to have a life they love. That first came from you. It sounds as if you started with yourself with that desire and sort of have been multiplying that with other people.
I really I was so curious to understand whether or not it was even possible. How can somebody it came from a place of curiosity. Like, how can people get to a point where they're happy again? Marrying someone that seemed very repulsive at the time, but I was like, "But how do people just get there?" So, I joined tons of Facebook group, I talked to hundreds of widows, I asked all the questions, just consumed it so that I could start to predict what people would tell other people, and, really started to understand that it requires action and it requires being proactive to rebuild your life. So, as I've talked with people, what I will tell widows if they're early on is that it starts with the belief that you can enjoy life again. You can love your life again. You don't have to know how. You don't have to see the pathway there. You just have to have this tiny shred of belief that some way, somehow it's possible. And if you don't believe it yet, I'm going to believe it for you. We're going to trust the process. And we're gonna take baby steps. And then people, as they take those steps, they start to see that for themselves. They start to get a glimpse of it. I did not realize I was gonna have to rebuild my entire life, my social circle, my interests, my goals, like, from the ashes, starting over. But just with everything that I've learned and everything I've been able to see other people go through as well, that is really where we are starting from is almost square one.
I like that. I like that just believe it's possible. And if you can't believe it, I'll believe it for you. And when I hear that, words are powerful. Our thought process is going to dictate where we're at in that grief journey. If I hear, if I constantly say, I'm going to be miserable the rest of my life, this is going to be horrible, my life is never going to be happy again. If we're constantly telling ourselves that, we will create that world for us. That is different than I'm sad that he's no longer here and I'm trying to figure out life. It's a sense of doom and eternal misery that you cannot get out of. And if you start there and you continually telling yourself that, the pull out of that becomes difficult.
Mm.
When you're, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, you're bringing out the life coach in me now. So,
I was just going to say, if I were the discovery call and you leaned right into it and you're sitting down and that's my message, what would that look like in working with you?
yeah. So, what I help teach people, and this takes a lot of practice and it takes time, right? But your thoughts directly impact your feeling, and that will downstream into your actions and to your results. But we start with your thought. And you're so right. If you have this thought of, it's hopeless, nothing I can do matters, I'll never feel this way. That's why I said you have to start with the belief that it's possible and that you don't have a new thought that's like, oh, I'm going to love my life and it's going to be great. It has to be something true and it has to be something that you can get behind. You can get your energy behind it. So your new thought might be, I don't see how it's possible, but I choose to believe that it is.
Mm.
Or it could be, I'm going to take one step at a time. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to trust the process. I work with people to understand like what is the most true thought for them that we could start to work with. And even just encourage them, like, if you'll just trust the process, whether it's going through grief recovery method or it's taking them through something else, you'll see in just a few weeks your entire mindset start to shift. But time alone is not enough to heal our wounds. And that's one of the big components of what grief recovery method teaches is that you have to put action behind that decision. That you can't just sit back and wait for things to get better because oftentimes you may find they actually feel worse.
So are you saying when people tell me in time my grief will just get better, they're not accurate?
Correct. They are not. And I encourage people to think about it like a physical wound. So let's say you break a bone. So coming from healthcare this feels very natural to me, right? So you break a bone, and what do you do immediately? You go seek medical care and you get that bone treated. Well, if you were to not seek medical care and let that bone try to heal on its own, what you may find months later or years later is that bone, now there's going to be a complicated healing process because now they've got to re-break it, reset it, have surgery, and it may be a more difficult process. Not to discourage people if they have already waited that time, but just to be aware that there's not going to be a time where you just magically feel better. I had a wonderful widow on the podcast that talked about this where she waited 3 years of just going through the motions of just trying to get through the day, and 3 years later, she actually felt worse than she did when her husband died.
I can relate to that. And when I hear that, I think about somebody being stuck in a space because you mentioned that for this to change, it requires us to take action. It requires us to lean into what is the most painful thing that we don't want to lean into. It makes me think of someone that their and their spouse used to go to the grocery store, so they don't go to the grocery store anymore. They start pulling back from all of the things that they enjoyed doing with their spouse, and they've isolated and they're feeling stuck. And often people, whether it is unfortunately the passing of a parent, a child, but whoever it is that you are grieving, are there some things that people could consider or they could do in trying to get unstuck from that place?
Yeah, I think it starts with doing the work of emotional healing. So that might be therapy, it might be a grief group, it might be reading some grief books, but allowing yourself to sit in and process the pain. My coach, Dr. Betsy Guerra, she talks about pain is like poop, basically. And it's like it can be a fertilizer if we will embrace it and process it and let it go. But we don't wanna do that because it stinks and it's awful and it's just we don't like that. But if you'll process it, it actually will fertilize and help you grow and you will blossom and thrive through that. And so for me, I tell people it starts with the emotional healing and you don't have to feel pressure to get out there and start doing a bunch of things. But over time, start taking some of those steps to connect with people, to go to the grocery store and know it's going to be hard and awkward and weird. And if you will just keep doing it, what actually is happening is your brain needs time to make new associations. That's why holidays and milestones are hard because they really only come around once a year. So it takes longer for our brain to stop associating that holiday every time with that person.
That's really good. If I were a member of Brave Widow, what does that community look like, and how does that help me on my grief journey?
Yeah, so we have all sorts of courses and things inside the community where we help meet widows where they are in the journey. So typically, I'll connect with widows as they come in, make sure I understand where they are, what exact next step I would recommend for them of where they should focus. We also have calls twice a month. So tomorrow we're doing, at the time of this recording, tomorrow will be Valentine's, and we're doing a special Valentine's Day work session where we're going to honor the love that we have for our late person. And then typically I'll have a group coaching call where people can come and get coaching, or they can just get to know other widows and connect there. We have private forums, which is kind of like a social media setup. So you can see other people's profiles, you can chat with each other, you can direct message each other and have that relationship there. And then throughout the year, we have different mastermind groups or things that we focus on. So in the general community, this next month in March, we're going to be focusing on decluttering your mind and your home, and just some tips on like how to maintain your home throughout the year and how to get through the challenges of when do I get rid of my spouse's things? What do I do with them? How do I make the process easier? So every month's a little bit of a different theme of what we do in the overall community.
I like that in March, coming into spring cleaning, that mindset and leveraging that. That is amazing. I am so grateful for you being willing to be a part of this conversation and to be connected. Widowhood already, there for the long game you are. Are there some things that you wanted to make sure that we spoke about, or some things you wanted to highlight that maybe I haven't covered in this conversation?
I think you've been a phenomenal host. And I think my goal in this conversation, which I think we covered, is really just to help inspire someone to believe that no matter how hopeless and pointless and frustrating the journey is, and it is a frustrating journey, is to have that tiny spark of belief that it is possible to have a life that you can truly love and be excited about for the future. I know it's possible for you.
That is beautiful. I did think of one thing. We did not touch upon managing the grief of young children as you're simultaneously managing yours. My children were adults when their dad passed. I think there's unique um, challenges in each of those groups. I often hear of younger widows with young children that they're very apprehensive about showing their grief to their children because their children would start trying to take on the role as the missing parent, or they don't want to scare their children. What are some things that you had to navigate from your perspective with having younger children? You kind of had a range there also from 10 to 19. So kind of doing it all together. If you would share some of that, please.
One of the most helpful things that I learned early on was just managing my expectations of what I thought grief should look like from them. They all responded very differently, and we typically think about the 5 stages of grief, and so we expect everyone should cry and everyone should, look a certain way or talk a certain way, and all 4 of my kids responded very differently, and I'm grateful that I got to learn that early on, or else I think I really would have worried a lot about, "Well, this one hasn't cried yet. What's wrong?" Um, I did put each of them in therapy and counseling, and some have stayed much longer than others. And how I thought about it was I wanted to be honest with my kids, and so we had a conversation early on where I would just say, "Look, this whole grief thing is going to be difficult to navigate. So there may be days where I'm irritable or sad, or, someone's in a bad mood and we don't really know why. And that's probably just the grief in the background underneath the surface. And so we just want to be understanding with each other and then also be able to talk about it." But I wouldn't, and there were times, I mean, I had tissues in every room of the house. So it wasn't like, "Oh, I have a teary moment and I need to cry for a minute." But I also where I did hold back or where I did schedule my grief, if you will, is when that, pit from your stomach, sobbing, weeping and wailing and all of those things. I did not do that in front of my kids, but I also didn't hold back just regular tears and talk about things that I was thinking about and all of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am so grateful. I know you were super busy. You're getting ready for the call and everything you have going on and still taking time to reach out to other people because the one thing I've learned, everyone needs an opportunity to connect with someone and hear something different because it helps them pick a piece of that nugget in their own particular journey. So thank you for making time for this conversation. Any questions of me? I like to ask people if they have anything. Sometimes there's something in the back of my mind, may not be, but I figure I ask.
I don't know that I have a question, but I just really want to give you kudos because what you didn't mention about the winter solstice was you had committed to being on the panel, you showed up for the panel, and you were also incredibly sick. And your beautiful spirit came through. You gave so many like wisdom bombs on the widows. And it was obvious. I can't remember what exactly you had, but it was
Pneumonia.
yeah.
I literally had been feeling like something was coming on, and I went to the hospital, emergency, urgent care or something, couldn't get into my primary care. And it was like, you have pneumonia. And when I came home, I was a hot mess. And it was the day of that. And I was telling my husband, I was like, I've committed to this because I know what it's like to be in that place. I know what it's like when people say they're going to do something for you and then they don't show up. I know what it's like to have to do the event. I know what it's like to be that widow that may have read that one bio and wanted to hear from that person. And sometimes, like you said, it's those small things. You're trying to hold on. When you have something to hope for and look forward to, you want that thing to happen. If not, the letdown seems so much worse for me after Mark died than a letdown I dealt with before. So I don't take that lightly. Um, my journey of breast cancer before Mark died showed me how to say no and not overcommit. So when I do say yes to things, as you can tell, my intention to be there, and I was so hyped up on medication and so like propped in the chair, but I was like, I want to be there for those widows because there were people that were there for me. So, but after that, I was laid out for like 3 or 4 days. He was so mad at me. When I left out of this office, he was standing there with the meanest face I've seen ever. And he was like, what? And I was like, I'm sorry. I medicated and was out. But I
Well,
thank you because I wanted to be there for them.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can hear your heart through that story, and I just want your audience to know, like, this event was late in the evening, and I gave you an easy opportunity to bow out gracefully, and just the strong-willed response of like, "No, I'm here, I'm doing this, it's going to happen." Like, there was no question, so thank you for that as well, and thank you for hosting me on your show.
You're welcome. And I like to give my guests an opportunity to close the conversation. Any final thoughts or things you want to share? Or I think we covered how they can reach you, but anything you want to wrap up this discussion?
The last thing that I would just share is that grief recovery and healing your heart is really just the beginning. You can build a life that is so much more abundant and beautiful and allows you to hold two things that feel like opposing truths in your hands, which is I love my person, I love the life I had, and I love my life today equally. And until you get there, it's hard to believe that that's possible, but I just want to encourage that it's possible for you too.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.